He sold our house to impress his mistress, but my signature made him regret it. Marcy Peterson stood in the kitchen, her fingers tracing the chipped edge of a coffee mug as the late morning sun filtered softly through the lace curtains. The scent of jasmine from the garden drifted faintly in the air, usually comforting, but today it couldn't steady the hollow knot tightening in her chest. Her blue knit cardigan, familiar and worn at the sleeves, wrapped around her like a shield, yet it felt suddenly threadbare against what was coming. Greg, her husband, slammed the back door behind him, shoes leaving dusty prints on the worn hardwood. His voice was cold, unsettlingly so. "Marcy, I sold the house." The words hit her like a gust of winter wind. The Peterson family trust folder, always kept in the oak drawer beside the stove, lay open on the kitchen table. She stepped forward, eyes scanning the scattered papers, heart sinking as she noticed something was missing. A page torn cleanly away. "Without telling me?" Her voice was soft but edged with disbelief. Greg's smirk was a blade. "I make the big decisions around here now." His eyes flicked toward Troy, his friend, standing awkwardly nearby, arms crossed, the distant grin turning sour as he tried half-heartedly to mask his amusement. Troy leaned in, whispering loud enough for Marcy to hear. "Housewives and the fine print. Never mix, huh?" His tone was mocking but clumsy, and Marcy's cheeks flamed crimson. The room seemed to shrink around her, their laughter prickling her skin like needles. As Troy shuffled, a stack of papers slipped, scattering across the floor. The trust folder fell open, and Marcy caught sight of the torn edge where the missing page had been. Greg's gaze darted away quickly, but never met hers. She reached out, fingertips trembling, picking up the document. The gap in the paperwork wasn't just a mistake. It was erasure. Her voice trembled. "Why is this page missing?" Greg waved her question off. "You won't understand the details. It's done." The crushing realization crashed onto her. This wasn't just about a property sale. It was about her being shut out, erased from decisions that shaped the life she had built. The kitchen's warmth felt distant as the walls seemed to close in. Her refuge, the sunlit bungalow softened by years of tending flowers and quiet evenings, had been stripped from her without so much as a warning. But amid the cold sting of betrayal, her eyes rest on the blue ink scrawled faintly on the remaining papers, a note she hadn't seen before, tucked beneath the contract. Both parties must sign to finalize any sale. That phrase lingered like a fragile thread of hope through the dark. It was small, almost invisible, but it breathed possibility. Marcy clenched the papers, bitterness burning under her skin, but beneath it, something quieter and fiercer flickered. A spark of determination that no dismissive smirk or clumsy joke could snuff out. Today, her place at the table had been denied. Tomorrow, she would reclaim it. The weekly potluck buzzed with the usual hum of clinking plates and laughter, but Marcy felt every eye not just see, but dismiss her. Greg stood at the center of the crowded living room in their tight-knit Maplewood neighborhood hall, his slicked-back hair catching the overhead lights like a spotlight. His grin was unreadable but forced, as if he was performing a role he wasn't quite comfortable with. "We're moving," he announced loudly, voice carrying across the room, "upgrading to a real place downtown." Marcy glanced toward the street, visible through the cracked-open window. Across the way, by a shiny convertible, stood a woman wearing expensive designer sunglasses. She looked out of place in this quiet neighborhood, and Greg's eyes kept flicking toward her whenever he thought no one was watching. The whisper started almost immediately, a mixture of surprise and judgment weaving through the crowd like a cold draft. Some sidelong glances hinted at disbelief, others at amusement. Marcy's face flushed crimson, a familiar tightening in her chest rising as the realization sank deeper into her skin. This was not just a relocation. It was a public reshaping of her identity, a signal that she was being left behind. Trying to focus on something steady, her gaze met Sonia's across the room. Sonia's smile was hesitant, her hand reaching out as she came to Marcy's side to offer a soft, reassuring pat on her arm. "You're stronger than you think," Sonia whispered, barely audible over the chatter. Marcy bit her lip, grateful for the momentary comfort, but the crowd's responding laughter and murmurs didn't abate. Most neighbors had already turned away, avoiding her eyes. She felt stripped bare, her dignity peeling away in waves. Retreating to the kitchen, the space that had been her refuge for years, Marcy leaned her forehead against the cool tile backsplash. A hum of conversation from the main room felt miles away now. In the dim light, she pressed her palm against the edge of the sink, trying to summon calm. Then, from the hallway, hushed voices floated in. One was the realtor's, speaking low but clear. The signing set for Friday noon. Both owners have to be there. The words hung in the air, sharp, against the dishwasher's clatter. Both owners. That meant Marcy. Her heart squeezed tight. The deadline was looming. Invisible but real and unforgiving. Marcy closed her eyes, the sound of the simmering coffee pot filling the silence around her. The upcoming day wasn't just about paperwork. It was a test of whether she could reclaim the power being stolen from her. Tomorrow was a line in the sand. She wasn't sure if she'd cross it yet, but the fight was no longer optional. If a moment like this ever hit close to home, I'd love to hear how you found your way forward. Marcy sat at the kitchen table late that afternoon, the fading light casting long shadows over her worn hands as she dialed the number for the realty office. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but the slow burn of anger mixing with exhaustion. The line clicked. A brusque voice answered. Sunset Realty, how may I direct your call? Hi, this is Marcy Peterson. I'm calling to inquire about the sale of our house, she said cautiously, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. I was told there might be paperwork I can review. There was a pause, then the voice hardened. Your husband handled everything, ma'am. The deal's closed on their end. There's no further paperwork for you. The finality stung like a slap. Marcy bit back the urge to argue. May I please have the online access to view the documents myself? You're not authorized, the agent replied instantly. Greg's account has exclusive control. Her chest tightened. Greg had already gone a step ahead, reset the passwords, locked her out of anything related to the sale. The realization settled like a heavy fog. She was cut off, sidelined, made invisible in what should have been a shared decision. It wasn't just betrayal, it was strategic erasure. Later, she tried to log in to the realty site on her laptop but hit a wall. New passwords, security questions she had no answer to. Each failed attempt felt like another brick tearing down her bridge to the truth. What am I even fighting for anymore? She whispered, staring blankly at the frozen screen. Her world tightened until the walls seemed to contract. Maybe leaving quietly was easier. Maybe this battle wasn't worth the heartbreak. But then her phone buzzed gently across the counter. Sonia's name lit up the screen. When Sonia slipped into the kitchen, she held out a small, faded photograph with a quiet intensity. Marcy's eyes scanned the image. Greg, unshaven and tense, caught mid-conversation with the woman from across the street, the one in expensive sunglasses. They stood outside the title office, the engraved sign behind them clear as day. On the back, a handwritten date caught Marcy's breath. 2 days before Greg had even told her about any sale. The real papers start here, Sonia whispered, voice low but steady. He's been planning this behind your back. Marcy's heart pounded, a mix of shock and a flicker of hope igniting beneath the weight of betrayal. There was a thread she could pull. Somewhere in the tangled mess of lies, there was proof. Traceable, tangible. For the first time in days, Marcy felt something sharper than despair. Possibility. It wasn't over yet. The morning air was sharp with a faint chill, seeping through the cracked window above the sink as Marcy sat at the kitchen table, her hands clutching the sleek, heavy pen Greg had just tossed onto the varnished surface. The glossy black instrument felt foreign and accusing in her grasp. Just sign. It's a done deal. Greg's voice echoed with false warmth, his eyes cold beneath heavy lids. The sharp click as he snapped the pen open lingered in the quiet room. Louder than any accusation, Marcy's fingers trembled involuntarily, knuckles blanching as she stared down at the papers spread before her. The family trust documents, usually a sacred ledger of shared memories and security, now felt like a battlefield strewn with lies. Underneath her, the aged rug rubbed rough against her socks, a coarse, thorny reminder that the ground beneath her was anything but stable. Her breath came in shallow pants, the room dizzy and spinning, every muscle locked tight, her heart drumming a frantic rhythm she could barely quiet. She wanted to speak, to shout, to refuse, but her voice was lodged deep, caught between skepticism and fear. The countdown to irrevocable loss loomed invisible but relentless. Fingers seeking certainty, Marcy reread the trust document, her eyes skimming over the typed clauses until a small, overlooked detail froze her in place. Behind a creased divider sat a handwritten addendum. Penned in careful, flowing blue ink, her mother-in-law's handwriting, she recognized it instantly. The words were simple but seismic. Both parties' notarized signatures required for title transfer. The phrase caught in her throat. This was the line Greg hoped she'd never find. A legal hook it tethered her to hope. It meant the sale was not yet finalized, not without her consent. Her pulse jumped, sharp and sudden, like the first light cracking through heady clouds. The power she thought stripped away might still reside within those elusive lines. Greg watched her warily, the easy confidence slipping as he noted the sharp intake of her breath. His smirk faltered. "Don't waste your time," he hissed, voice tight, a flicker of something like fear, or maybe guilt, passing behind his eyes. For a moment, the facade cracked to reveal a man caught between desperation and doubt. Marcy's trembling hands steadied as a quiet determination flooded through her. The rough fibers beneath her feet weren't a trap. They were the grit she stood on to reclaim her rightful place. This piece of paper, this tiny concession from someone who had once been family, was her lifeline. A single thought crystallized in the hush. The fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. If a moment like this ever hit close to home, I'd love to hear how you found your way forward. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows as Marcy and Sonia pulled up to the title office, the chill of early afternoon pressing cold against the car windows. The building ahead was plain, sterile, with a row of faded chairs and a reception desk that gleamed under fluorescent lights. The lobby smelled faintly of coffee and cleaning supplies, emptiness settling around them like a shroud. Greg's temper simmered on the drive over, his voice sharp and clipped through the phone as Marcy had called him earlier, pleading for a chance to see the documents together. Each refusal gnawed at her, but Sonia's quiet presence at her side grounded her, easing the unease. "You're doing the right thing," Sonia said softly, her hand briefly pressing Marcy's arm. Inside, Marcy unfolded the worn Peterson family trust folder carefully, revealing the brittle documents and the faded ink where days before she had found the crucial handwritten addendum, both parties' notarized signatures required for title transfer. The paper was fragile, but the words carried the weight of law. She approached the receptionist, her voice firm but courteous. "Hi, can you tell me the notarization policy here? Specifically, does a property sale require both owners to be present and sign?" The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes but a practiced smile, leaned forward. "Yes, ma'am. We can't notarize the transfer of title without both living owners physically present and providing authentic signatures. It's the policy to prevent fraud." Marcy's heart fluttered, a fragile thread weaving her resolve tighter. The clause in the trust was more than a paper promise. It was a procedural safeguard backed by official policy. It meant Greg's plan was far from complete. The clock ticked noisily in the nearly empty lobby, each second inching closer toward noon, the firm deadline for finalizing the sale. The risk was terrifyingly real. Failure to stop the signing today would mean losing the house, her security, her home's roots, all slipping away like sand through clenched fists. She felt the brittle edges of the family trust folder beneath her fingers, a tangible connection to a past and a future she wasn't willing to surrender. Greg's name echoed from the office beyond, as he strode in, confident but barely masking impatience. Marcy's eyes met Sonia's, both understanding the stakes. This was no longer just a battle for a house. It was a fight for her dignity and her right to stand firm. The receptionist glanced at the clock, then at Marcy. "You're prepared," she said gently. Marcy inhaled deeply and nodded. Today would be a turning point. Sometimes the smallest details hold the greatest power. Never underestimate what a page, a signature, or a witness can change in your story. The door clicked open with a soft chime, and Greg strode into the sterile lobby flanked by the realtor and the woman he'd been sneaking glances at for weeks. Her expensive sunglasses still perched atop her head even indoors. Marcy rose from the hard plastic chair, the weight of the Warren Peterson Family Trust folder steady in her hands. Her breath was steady, voice calm despite the tremble she could barely conceal. "I won't be signing," she declared, laying the folder carefully on the polished desk between her and the notary. The photos, crisp and damning, sat atop the papers. Greg and the woman outside the title office, dated 2 days before Greg's admitted timeline. The notary, an older man with wire-rimmed glasses and an expression that brooked no nonsense, adjusted his paperwork and scanned the addendum nestled within the folder. Blue ink, elegant and unmistakable. Without Mrs. Peterson's notarized signature, he said slowly, piercing Greg with a firm gaze, "This sale cannot be completed today." Greg's confident smirk faltered, hardening into a grimace. His mistress stepped back, the air thick with tension as whispered conversations rippled through the waiting area. The realtor's wide smile vanished, her scripted politeness replaced by a visible shift of discomfort. "I don't understand this clause," Greg stammered, eyes flickering to Marcy, seeking some leverage or mercy that wasn't there. The notary shook his head. "Policy is clear. Both owners must appear and authorize the sale. Foregoing one is invalid." Marcy met Greg's gaze evenly, her heart pounding but her stance unwavering. The betrayal hung between them like a low thundercloud. But now she held the proof and the law firmly in her hands. Sonia, standing resolutely behind her, smiled in quiet support. Greg's shoulders sagged, a flicker of defeat betraying the mask of arrogance. For a moment, his eyes softened, hinting not at victory, but regret. In that charged silence, Marcy realized a truth deeper than legalities. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet strength to say no. When dignity finally speaks, who tends to listen in your world? Greg's voice cracked as he tried to defend himself, waving his hands in frantic gestures that only half concealed his panic. "Look, it's been a complicated few weeks. Stress got to me." His eyes darted from the notary to Marcy, searching for any sliver of forgiveness, but found none. The room felt heavy with tension, the sterile air pressing in like a weight. The notary remained firm, folding the papers with deliberate care. "Without Mrs. Peterson's explicit consent and notarized signature, the sale cannot proceed." His words cut through the room, final and unwavering. Around the office, a murmur rippled from onlookers, staff, and a few waiting clients drawn by the unexpected confrontation. Marcy stepped forward, holding the photograph Sonia had given her, the one of Greg and the woman outside the title office, dated 2 days before he'd even mentioned selling the house. "This photo proves he concealed the timeline," Marcy said steadily, voice clear despite the tight knot in her chest. "He misrepresented the sale, and that means this transaction isn't just rushed, it's dishonest." Greg's mouth snapped shut, his smirk gone, replaced by a shadow of guilt. He tried to speak, but found no words that could undo the damage. The office manager approached with a formal nod, pulling out the phone to notify the buyers. "The sale is canceled," she announced softly, but with authority. "They will be informed immediately." Sonia, standing close by, lifted her phone and captured a quick photo of Marcy, holding the documents and the evidence that had won her this quiet victory. The receptionist offered an apologetic glance. "We're sorry you had to go through this, Mrs. Peterson." Neighbors who had gathered outside caught snippets of the story soon after. Greg's forced confession spread. He admitted the house would remain under Marcy's name according to the trust. The realtor, forced to confront her oversight, publicly expressed regret for not recognizing Marcy's rightful role sooner. The triumph was understated but palpable, quiet justice restored. Marcy felt the relief ripple through her body like warm sunlight, the invisible armor of resilience settling comfortably on her shoulders. In this moment, she was more than the underestimated woman who had been sidelined. She was a guardian of her own story now. The afternoon sunlight spilled soft and golden over Marcy's porch, filtering through the thick clusters of hydrangeas and casting gentle shadows on the freshly painted railings. She knelt beside her flower bed, hands carefully tucking in new blooms between the familiar perennials. The earth smelled rich and welcoming under her fingers, a far cry from the cold uncertainty that had threatened her weeks ago. Across the street, Sonia waved from her front yard, clutching a steaming mug of coffee as if it were a warm conversation in pooled sunlight. Marcy lifted her gaze and smiled, that quiet, resilient smile that had once seemed hard to find, but now felt like her second skin. She stood and walked to the wooden swing on the porch, the same faded navy cardigan wrapped around her shoulders, now carefully mended at the worn cuffs. It was a subtle badge of battles fought and dignity reclaimed. Opening the Peterson Family Trust folder on the small table beside her, Marcy traced the lines of the documents, pausing on the handwritten addendum with a newfound sense of ownership. Years of love and labor had made this house a home, but it had been the strength to stand firm that truly secured her place in it. She folded the papers with care, adding her own note, a simple sentence inked with hope and boundary. This home belongs to its keeper. She knew now that your signature was more than scribbled ink. It was a statement of worth. Invisible no longer, her name mattered. Justice wasn't always a thunderous roar. Sometimes it was the quiet refusal to be erased, the gentle insistence to be seen and respected. The porch creaked as she settled back into the swing, the late sunlight warming her face. Tomorrow might hold new challenges, but today was hers. The neighborhood buzzed softly, the rhythm of everyday life unfolding like a promise. Marcy breathed in deeply, the scent of honeysuckle mingling with earth and memory. The house was hers, and so was her future. If a moment like this ever hit close to home, I'd love to hear how you found your way forward. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button. See you in our next story.